I am often talking about the way in which reality can be experienced as boundless, seamless, a continuum, and where the apparent divisions that seem to exist, the sense of that we're somehow, or the idea that we're somehow separate from the whole of life, can be cut through, can be recognized to be certainly a view, but not the only way that reality can be experienced. And times when I have explored that with folks, I've noticed that something that often people will bump up against is a sense of, well, they'll say, well, you're talking about how there's no boundaries, there's really no seams, no dividing lines separating one thing from another. People often will feel that what's separating them from the world, the dividing line is the body, right? So that there's a body and then there's a world, right? And that's kind of and it's strong, sometimes subtly so, in us, that sense of the sense of being a separate individual subject living in a world, an objective world, kind of the identification with a body, or the body being that bounded thing that separates us from what is not self, right? Is can be quite convincing. And so I just wanted to explore that a little bit this morning, today. So just as you're sitting here, feel the sense of the body as a kind of structure encasing what we think of as our life. Feel that perspective. It's all very familiar to us. Like, I'm inside of the body and the world is outside of the body, right? Let's just feel that we're skin bound. All these things, mind, personality, life, selfhood, all of this somehow contained in the skin suit of the body. And then outside of that is the environment, right? The world, the objective world. And now I want you to just feel sort of inside of the skin suit, the body, a sense of aliveness inside the body, and then feel whatever you think is the edge of the body, the boundary that is the body line, right? That makes up the body. Feel that supposed edge, and notice how you can't find it. Feel what you call the body, including the end of the body, the edge of the body. Feel that. And notice how there's no edge to it. You can't find an edge to it, can you? We know the body, there's a concept of having a body, of course, but our encounter with this thing called the body is pure experience. And as experience, this is what's so interesting and illuminating, is as experience, the experience of the body is open-ended. Feel that now. Feel how the body has no end. Where's the end of the body? What you call the experience of the body. At what point does the body end and the world begin as experience? Can you actually find a point? Or do you experience nothing but openness? Experience is completely open, isn't it? Our body is, from this vantage I'm describing and pointing to, is everything that's being experienced, not just the supposedly presumed to be separate thing called the physical body. The body of experiencing is really our true body, which has no end to it. It has no finality to it. It has no edge to it. It has no, there's no outside world and inside world, is there? There's no, there's nothing blocking anything. There's nothing shielding us from the world. there's no barrier there. There's no barricade there. It's not possible to put one up. What would that be? Everything is completely porous. Everything is completely open. Everything is completely exposed. To what? It's not really exposed, isn't really the right way to put it, because again, that suggests there's something separate from the world, and the thing that's separate from the world is somehow exposed to the world and vulnerable to the world. But that's not what we're experiencing right now. We're experiencing just this. There's not two things. There's not a world and a self. There's just this. There's not one thing potentially imposing itself on us or threatening us as somehow a vulnerable self somehow at the mercy of a potentially threatening world, objective world. That's actually conceptual. Experientially, there's just experience. And the experience is absolutely a continuum that doesn't have any gaps anywhere, where one thing comes to an end, there's a gap, and then another thing begins. Like, here I am, then there's a gap, then the world begins somehow, right? I'm thinking back on being younger, and I used to love geography for some reason as a kid, and coloring in the maps of different continents, like Africa standing out for you. You draw a line around each of the countries, and then you fill it in with different colors to make the distinctions between the countries. But those that's kind of what we do. We like draw, consciousness really is doing this. It's like it draws a circle around, like, here's the outline of, like, I'm looking at a picture right now of those of you whose pictures I can see. I'm seeing Sylvia right now, and Zoe and Nina. And so I could draw like a line around you, just like I would with the countries in the continent of Africa. And there's the border, right? the border of Sylvia and the border of Nina. And, but even visually, that's artificial. Because I can't, if I just look at the visual image, I can see that I can't actually find, like, I can't find the line. Visually, I can't find it either. This is the seamless nature of everything. So this recognition of this experiential sort of vantage is one of no inside and outside, right? Inside. What do you mean inside? What do you mean outside? It's really, this is sort of the disappearance of space in a sense, and dimensionality, because there's not like objects sitting in some space that are separated from the space, right? There's just, it's wild, isn't it? Now, I don't know if you have a sense of this as you feel this. You are feeling this, actually. And I'm just pointing out something that you're already feeling, you're already experiencing, is already being experienced right now, which is this seamlessness. How peaceful that is. Because there's not one thing looking for something else. There's not two things. There's not one thing like a self looking for something else, like an experience or a realization or an insight or anything. And there's also not an objective world that could potentially harm that separate subject living inside the skin suit. There's just a flow of experiencing, a flow of perceiving, a flow of being. It was very restful. There's nothing missing from this because there's nothing outside of this. It's the continuum that's inclusive of everything. So nothing is missing. It's the embrace of everything. But of course, the everything that's being embraced is not separate from the embrace. The embrace is just, it's more just an effulgence, just an emanation, just a shining as everything. The undivided nature of reality, the seamless whole that it is isn't something that needs to be created or efforted to reach. It is simply here, inexplicably, mysteriously, magically. And the streaming forth of this instant, streaming forth as this continuum without any boundaries anywhere. The very streaming of this, the very flow of this is just pure nourishment. That's one of the invitations that I'm often inviting us to explore, to discover, is that contrary to how we typically think of well-being as being housed in particular aspects of what's being perceived, right? Certain things that we like, those are the sources of well-being. Could it be, just consider it a hypothesis, that the deepest, most primal well-being, the well-being that can't be ever taken away, is in the very streaming itself? Not in what it looks like or is being described, but just in the sheer streaming forth of this instant, this pure well-being. It's really prior to all the elaborations about it and all of the distinctions being drawn about this and that, this versus that, this is okay, this is not okay. It's prior to all of that. It's in the very birth of this instant, the birthing, the constant birthing of this, isn't it? It's constant, the birthing. It's very curious. I was reflecting on this morning, how this is here for no time, because the birth of this instant is literally its vanishing, right? I often speak about this. Like, that's how radically dynamic and impermanent it is. It's just, it's the appearance and the disappearance are simultaneous. And in that sense, there isn't anything here. And yet, there is this sense of, this came up and someone was asking this question last week about time and the flow of time. And yet there is this sense of this flow of time, this flow of appearing, isn't it? Like, and that is our capacity, in a sense, to enjoy the flow of experiencing. Because even though this is gone no sooner than it appears, there is still this sense of continuity, and that is the flow. It's like this constant, it's just this constant streaming, but it's like it's changing shape as it's taking shape. How strange is that? It's like it's assuming of shape is its changing of its shape. So it never really lands anywhere definitive. That's why we can't pin it down. That's why we can't define it, even though we try mightily. And this is why, I wanted to just say this before I open it up for some exploring together, just that it's so natural as the languaged, conceptualizing creatures that we are, and just the consciousness does this on its own, essentially, effortlessly, like to try to wrap our heads around all of this conceptually and linguistically, and just to remember as we enter into some dialogue together, like how impossible that actually is. That this is so utterly beyond being able to put it into some kind of, I figured it out conceptually. Now I can describe it. No. No. It's too vast. There's too much there. And what is there, apparently there, is also slipping away, slipping away, slipping away. So that's why you can't pin it down. Here it is. I finally figured out what it is, and now I can describe it. No. Because whatever we just described, no longer here. And yet there's this flow, this glorious, magical, potent, nourishing flow of this radiance. It's so beautiful. It's so astonishing. It's so brilliant and clear and open-ended and it's like, this pouring of this water, of nourishment, like reality just it's like the grace, the grace is just pouring forth constantly as each instant, not as some other instant, as this instant, this perception, this thought, this memory, this little tinge of discomfort, or this big pang of pain, or this moment of ecstatic bliss, or this moment of seeming contraction, this moment of, all of it is the shine of this open-ended, seamless continuum of perceiving, shining, being.